Good morning from the Fisherfield area of the Northwest Highlands. I've actually been up here for a few days now, up in Assington, Koyak, but now I'm back down in Fisherfield, keen to explore a new area. I'm actually here with a workshop client who wants to do the same. So that's what we're doing today. The weather forecast is a little bit unsettled, lots of showers are forecast. And we're just hoping that the cloud base is going to rise, because actually there should be a mountain behind me if the clouds were high enough. But as you can see, autumn has arrived, so there's lots of nice colour around, although it's looking quite blue at the moment because it's still the early hours of the morning. We've got about 6 kilometres to walk, and I'm going to a location that I found on Google Earth, hoping that that's going to create an interesting view with the mountains beyond, should we be able to see them. So that's the plan for today. Just quickly stopped to take a photo here because the mist rolling over the hills in the back there is pretty lovely, and this is actually a well-known mountain here, Anchelac, and we've got the river leading into the scene, which is very nice, although I don't think the composition knits together that brilliantly, but still a nice scene to photograph. So this was an unexpected bonus at the start of the day, really, and the conditions were so beautiful I just had to get my camera out. You've got that cloud drifting through in the background, creating this lovely layering effect, and a really beautiful transition from these warm colours of autumn in the grasses into those steel grey bluey tones in the clouds above. And a nice smattering of trees on the opposite side of the riverbank. But compositionally, it doesn't really work. The river doesn't lead anywhere we'd want it to lead. There's no real focal point, no place to rest the eye. So it becomes more of a textural and contextual shot than a really strong image in its own right. I did try a longer lens shot of the right-hand side, which I think is slightly better because it makes more of a feature of the trees on the far side of the bank that I mentioned. But both images really suffer from the same problem, which is feeling a little bit unstructured. So we're approaching a small coppice of birch trees here, and actually there aren't many woodlands in this area. So if you want to capture autumn, obviously you have the lovely colours of the grasses, which we'll be shooting for sure if the weather allows, but looking for patches of trees is obviously a good move if you want to get that really autumnal feel into your images. So my idea was to walk over the top of this coppice and see if it gave us any mountain views. Of course, if we can't see the mountains, then we'll just carry on our hike. Well, that looks pretty good. What a scene this is to come across. This is exactly why I wanted to get high over these woodlands, to try and find a scene like this. And this is just what I've been looking for. So I'm going to go grab my camera right now, because I actually think in these overcast conditions this is particularly beautiful. And it may be that if the sun comes out it actually spoils the scene. But you can see there's a lovely 4x5 type crop going through there, with the trees just perfectly framing the mountain in the background. You can't quite see the mountain right now because we've just had a band of rain pass through, but this is exactly the kind of scene I was looking for when I planned this route. So the idea was to come up above these birch trees to incorporate them into a composition looking out into the mountains, and you needed that height just to get above the valley level so that you could see the mountains in all their glory, but obviously we can't at the moment because of that rain. But a little bit earlier I shot a short video clip which gives you an idea of the view that I'm shooting, and then of course I focused on the actual photography. So it's actually been a very difficult shot to execute because the best spot to take the photo is on top of the moss covered rock there to my right, and the moss is this kind of thick, so I didn't want to tear that apart to get the tripod legs onto solid ground. So I've actually been bumping the ISO using the image stabilizer to try and get a series of sharp shots. And annoyingly, I also don't have a 50mm lens, so I'm shooting a 70mm vertical panorama to effectively get that wider field of view. I really couldn't be more happy with this photograph. I think it's one of the best images that I've taken in the past couple of years, certainly one of my favorites, and so it's going to go into a limited edition print set which I will be releasing shortly. But it combines so many things that I'm looking for in my landscape photographs, and it's probably firstly worth mentioning that I'd actually pored over maps of Fisherfield looking for little areas of deciduous woodland that might produce this kind of scene, but most of them are quite remote and very few have views through to the mountains. So that's why I wanted to explore this particular spot. But in terms of what makes it successful, I think firstly that the timing, obviously I've hit the peak of autumn here, which is partly luck because it can change that timing from year to year, but also the overcast conditions just after heavy rain have helped to produce the maximum vibrancy of colour possible. And I think even the low cloud is helping me in this case, just to hide the summits of the mountains and generate the idea that maybe they go on a bit further than they do in reality, so they create this impression of being more gigantic than they actually are. There's this lovely detail of the river splitting and producing these islands, which some particularly vibrant birch trees are sat on top of, so I think that that's a particularly stunning detail. And finally, of course, it's held together by this central framed composition, framed by the birch trees. And I'm very hard on myself when it comes to composition, so to come across a scene like this is hugely gratifying, and I just love this photo. I've continued shooting the scene you see behind me as the lights change. You can see the sun's come out and there's a bit of blue sky above the mountain now. But I think those earlier images that I shot were actually the better versions of this view, and I've actually continued out along the hill here to shoot some tighter images looking down into the valley as those bands of sunlight have passed through, and unfortunately I didn't video that. So I cut that short there because I started to waffle, but I did take a number of images which I'm going to show you now without my video camera. Unfortunately, I'd just gone out to have a little scout around, and then the rain started to come through and the light started changing, and I focused on shooting stills with my 5DSR. So this is looking back down in the direction that we came from, and I like this because the rain obscures the buildings in the distance, so it gives a slightly wilder atmosphere than it might otherwise have, and these kind of miserable rainy images are always a good foil to colourful sunset shots and more dramatic images. I then started shooting in the opposite direction as that rain moved away, and you can see here I'm using the trees as the foundation to the image and setting them against the power of the weather sweeping across the mountains. So I think this one works fairly well, although perhaps it's a little bit too simple, and I maybe didn't leave enough space at the bottom there. And then there's these two relatively similar images that I'm showing you side by side so you can compare them. I think ultimately the shot on the right is the one that I'm going to go for, because I think that sunlit cloud at the top of the mountain there and the way it's broken up just adds an extra element to the scene, brings in a little bit of drama. And the compositions are slightly different, obviously different patches of trees, and I think they both have their pros and cons, but it's that second image that I think I prefer. But after that shoot, the rain came back when we returned to the trees, because I thought I might have one last go at reshooting that main scene. But the rain came back, so we decided to move on and look for these locks that I'd found on Google Earth. This is the area that I thought would be good based on views on Google Earth. In fact, the exact Lochen is the one at the back there, the tiny little slither you can see. So maybe when we walk around we'll get an even better view. But even here you can see what a wonderful foreground this would make to any backdrop. And the two mountains that I'm interested in are here, Anchelach, and here, the Ben Jerrygs. And unfortunately both of them are in cloud. So we're going to hang around here for some time, I think, because there is always the chance that the cloud will lift. But really useful recce all the same to find such an amazing area for landscape photography. And this is the exact spot I wanted to find, and what a spot this is. If the mountains were clear, you'd really have a shot on your hands here. But even with a bit of light, I think this would work quite well. It's really nice to have these trees on the islands. It's relatively unusual. The reason there's trees here is that the deer can't graze them, or at least can't be bothered to wade out to the islands. They are what pegs back the trees in Scotland. So this is a wonderful location, and maybe we'll get lucky this evening, but if not, I'm definitely coming back here. A bit of rain has come through and we've been sitting here for best part of an hour now, but it's opening up a little bit. We can start to see the mountain again. We haven't seen that for a while. The other peak, Anchelach, which we've actually lined up for, is in this cloud here, and that looks a lot less likely to break free. So what we might do is move back to the hill over here to line up our Lochen with our mountain in the back there. This photo is a good reminder to me that I should always take the shot, because I have to say I was feeling a little bit pessimistic about what the weather was doing, and as much as I'd had a fantastic day up to that point, I just didn't really feel like photographing this scene. But then I changed my mind and I thought, well, I'm here, I might as well. And of course I got home and looked at the photos, because there's another one that you'll see in a second, and thought that they actually really accurately captured that kind of gloomy, sad atmosphere. And actually that's an important characteristic of the weather and landscape of the Highlands. In many ways this feels more Scottish to me than those brighter, more colourful scenes. So I'm really glad that I captured it. It looks like it's not quite going to happen for us this evening. The good news is we found a great new location to come back to, but although the cloud has teased us with rising a little bit higher, I don't think these mountains are ever going to come free of cloud today anyway. We've only got about 40-50 minutes until sunset. So I did take a shot. It's kind of atmospheric, at least. It'll give me something to refer to when I come back. But with scenes like this and the potential of the mountains behind, it is a place that I'm going to have to return to. And I will be back because there is a lot of potential here. But again, I think this does a pretty good job of capturing that atmosphere in bad weather in the Highlands. And it's my favourite of the two images because it has more of a layering effect. There's more variance in the lighting, and the mountain in the back there's just got a bit of a layering effect going on, and there's a bit more structure to the cloud. So I'll probably crop this a little less tight at the bottom, actually looking at it now, because it just looks a little bit tight there. But a pleasing photo, and I'll be looking forward to going back to that scene. But the weather did come in after that, so we headed back via a slightly different route back to the path and then eventually back to the car. But on our way out, we spotted a stag and managed to get close enough to it without spooking it to get this photo, which was a nice way to finish with this sort of iconic stag in the Highlands scene. So another really good day in the Highlands, and if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. There's a button just here, and I'd love it if this channel could get out to more people as well, of course. So if you'd like to recommend it around, then that's really greatly appreciated.